Do you notice how vegans and animal eaters insist they are completely different from each other? Yet in non-duality, the most fascinating truths emerge when we look closer. They are actually perfect mirror images of each other, locked in a dance neither can see. In this video, I'll explain non-duality using the most polarizing food war of our time. You'll see how both sides unconsciously create and maintain each other's roles, each avoiding the exact same thing in opposite ways, and why this insight is the key to understanding what non-duality really points to, as well as the key to self-realization itself. So instead, I'll show you why both vegans and animal eaters are caught in the same game of identity, and how seeing this clearly can transform your understanding of what you really are beyond all roles. So look around at the current landscape of the vegan-omnivore debate. Vegans are on the attack, and meat eaters are on the defense, and the battle is heating up. Social media has become a battleground where both sides throw statistics and moral arguments at each other like weapons, each convinced they hold the absolute truth. And yet somehow, despite all the fighting, neither side seemed to actually hear the other. What if I told you this entire drama is actually a perfect showcase for how the illusion of duality and self-identification works? That both sides seem to be caught in the same trap, just seen from opposite angles. And what if understanding this dynamic could reveal something profound about who you really are beyond all positions and beliefs? What if there was a way out of this duality? For either side, whether you identify as vegan or close to vegan, like a vegetarian, or animal consumer, it sounds unthinkable. Well, that's exactly what non-duality points to, and as such, it may shake you up. My name is Liv Kissper. I am an author on non-duality and transpersonal coach with a background in consciousness studies. I help exhausted seekers and entrepreneurs discover freedom in places they never thought possible. And note that I am not taking a side in this video. If you stick with me until the end, I'll share with you an opening tool that reveals how to see through any role you are unconsciously playing, not just around food choices, but in every area of life where you find yourself taking sides. Think of it as the ego's worst nightmare, because true freedom may just be the dissolution of all positions entirely. So let's start by looking at something nobody talks about: the perfect symmetry of avoidance between those two groups. Starting with vegans, we find a group deeply committed to a philosophy of nonviolence and compassion. Vegans often adapt their lifestyle not just for health reasons, but as a profound ethical and environmental stance. They see themselves as protectors of animal rights, believing firmly that all living beings possess intrinsic value and deserve to live free from harm. This belief extends beyond personal health to touch on broader issues such as environmental stewardship and sustainable living. And for many vegans, their dietary choices are woven into their identity as much as any badge of honor. They are pioneers of a future they believe will be more compassionate and just. So guys, this isn't just about the impact of meat consumption on climate change or animal rights. It goes deeper into the psychology of identification itself. The vegan identity often becomes intertwined with a sense of moral mission, creating a complex web of perceived benefits and hidden costs. While they may experience the benefits of living in alignment with their values, living their purpose, and feeling part of a growing compassionate movement focused on sustainability and veganism, they also face unexpected emotional challenges that go beyond the obvious struggles of vegan activism. Many vegans see themselves as the frontline warriors of social change, from what we eat to how we relate to the natural world. This self-perception is often what drives their vocal advocacy and the passion with which they defend their choices. Vegans, in their passionate stance for animal rights, often develop a curious blindness. While advocating for compassion towards animals, they frequently withhold that very same compassion from those who eat animals. They might label meat eaters as murderers or psychopaths, forgetting that they themselves likely ate animals at some point in their lives. Meanwhile, animal consumers perform their own elaborate dance of avoidance. They carefully shield themselves from connecting with the reality of where their food comes from. They might argue about tradition, nutrition, or natural order, all while avoiding the fundamental question of suffering that vegans raise. They distance themselves from the emotional reality of their food choices through jokes, dismissiveness, or attacks on vegan extremism. A fascinating study published in Group Processes and Intergroup Relations found that vegans face equal or worse discrimination than any other commonly marginalized groups, and the researchers found that only drug addicts were viewed more negatively than vegans. Most animal consumers do agree that exploiting animals is wrong when they become aware of the whole journey of their food to the plate, and they only eat animals according to their culture and traditions, while may avoiding eating dogs or rats that are popular in other parts of the world. In today's day and age, the practice of eating animals feels like a historical artifact, something that once served a purpose, but now clashes with what many see as humanity's evolving capacity for compassion and awareness, giving the growing alternatives. But the dynamic stays put, and both vegans and animals consumers have equal part in maintaining it and sabotaging change. But here is where it gets eye-opening. Each group's behavior actually strengthens and reinforces the other's position. When vegans attack with judgment and moral superiority, they push animal eaters deeper into defensiveness and resistance. When animal eaters respond with mockery and dismissal, they confirm vegans' perception of them as uncaring and close-minded. It's a perfect feedback loop of mutual reinforcement. Unlike more flexible roles we play in life, these identities become deeply entrenched through what we might call survival mythology, the stories we tell ourselves about what we need to be healthy and whole. For animal consumers, this often manifests as concerns about health benefits of veganism and fears about nutritional deficiencies. And for vegans, it appears as existential imperative to fight against what they perceive as widespread unconsciousness, leading to a kind of messianic complex that can actually hinder their effectiveness in promoting understanding and change. But the costs of this dance run deeper than either side realizes. For vegans, the price is a peculiar form of suffering, the pain of constant opposition, the exhaustion of perpetuate battle, the loneliness of self-imposed moral isolation. Their compassion becomes selective, focused only on animals, while hardening against humans who think differently. How many vegans do you know who love animals more than humans? Well, I used to be one of them, so I know the hidden suffering that comes with it. But nobody notices, and everyone is busy with protecting their side and feeling righteous about it. It's an ongoing drama that keeps nobody in particular on the edge of their seat. This selective compassion creates a fracture in their psyche, a contradiction between their proclaimed values and universal kindness and their lived experience of judgment and separation. For animal eaters, the cost is equally profound, but manifests differently. Their avoidance of the suffering question doesn't actually free them from it. Instead, it creates a subtle numbness, a disconnection, not just from the reality of their food choices, but from their own capacity for deeper feeling and reflection. This numbness often extends beyond the food, affecting their ability to connect authentically with all forms of suffering, including their own. And it is this very access to their own emotions and vulnerability that is needed in creating deeper and more sustainable connections with each other. I hope that by now you can see that this dynamic isn't simply about the benefits of a plant-based diet versus traditional eating habits. The role of the pragmatic omnivore carries its own perceived benefits: social acceptance, convenience, cultural connection, and the simple pleasures of unrestrained eating. Yet these benefits come with hidden costs that aren't immediately apparent. A subtle disconnection from deeper feelings, an unconscious guilt that must be constantly managed, and a reflexive defensiveness that affects relationships far beyond food choices. What's fascinating is that both groups are actually avoiding the same thing: the raw, unfiltered truth of their shared humanity. Vegans avoid acknowledging their kinship with those they judge, while animal eaters avoid acknowledging their kinship with those they consume. Both are running from the fundamental interconnectedness that non-duality points to, the reality that we cannot separate ourselves from any part of life without hurting ourselves, no matter how hard we try. This mirror dynamic we are exploring isn't unique to food choices. It's actually the blueprint for all identity-based conflicts, whether it's politics, religion, or even spiritual beliefs. We see the same pattern playing out again and again. One group defines itself in opposition to other, each becoming more rigid in their position through the very act of opposing the other. Look at how this works in the vegan-omnivore dynamic. The more a vegan identifies with their veganism, the more they need meat eaters to be wrong to maintain their sense of being right. And the more an animal eater feels attacked for their choices, the more they entrench themselves in justifications and counter-arguments. Neither side realizes they are actually creating and sustaining each other through this opposition. This is what non-duality points to, the profound truth that what appears to be conflict and separation is actually an intimate dance of mutual co-creation. The harder we try to separate ourselves from what we oppose, the more firmly we bind ourselves to it. It's like trying to create a mountain without simultaneously creating a valley. Impossible, because they define and create each other. The debunking myths about veganism and nutrition becomes almost irrelevant here, because the real conflict isn't about facts or health benefits of plant-based nutrition at all. It's about how deeply we invest in roles that promise salvation but deliver separation. Animal eaters often cling to traditions and social norms around food, even when understanding factory farming practices intellectually. Meanwhile, vegans who initially choose veganism for the planet or health reasons often find themselves transformed into reluctant activists, carrying a burden of awareness they were never asked for. But here is where it gets really interesting. What if both vegans and animal eaters are actually playing necessary roles in a larger awakening? What if their apparent opposition is actually serving a deeper purpose neither side can see? From the non-dual perspective, this entire dynamic isn't a problem to be solved, but a perfect reflection of how identification works, and therefore an opportunity for profound insight and freedom beyond the roles. Consider this. Every time a vegan judges a meat eater, they are unconsciously strengthening the very dynamic they wish to change. And every time an animal eater avoids the discomfort of awareness and dismisses vegan concerns, they are deepening the divide that keeps the conversation stuck. Yet this very stuckness, this very tension, is what can wake us up to something beyond positions entirely. The freedom my clients experience isn't about finding the right position or winning the argument. It's about seeing through the entire mechanism of positioning itself. It's about recognizing that our truest nature isn't any self-identity, no matter how true it may feel. Vegan or non-vegan, right or wrong, it's the awareness within which all positions arise and dissolve. Then real change is available, but it may be unexpected. It may not be in line with what you believe or fight for. And it's available when we look deeper into the protective mechanisms that keep the limiting identity in place. But of course, this is so dangerous for the self-identity. Its whole purpose is to keep itself on a life support, maintain the separation, the painful dynamic, so the show can go on. But maybe, consider that maybe the true freedom may look more unexpected than the self-identity tell you it should. Maybe true freedom don't take sides, and as such it moves mountains. This understanding transforms relationships and, well, the world in a radical way. When you are no longer identified with being the compassionate vegan or the practical meat eater, you are free to engage with others authentically without the need to defend or attack. Real dialogue becomes possible, and real understanding can emerge, not because you found the right position, but because you've stepped out of positioning entirely. And this transcends typical discussions about how to transition to vegan lifestyle or finding vegan recipe that even meat eaters love, even though those may be valuable too. The real transformation comes through seeing how both identities, the conscious vegan and the pragmatic omnivore, are actually two sides of the same coin. Both roles, while appearing to be in opposition, are actually maintaining each other through their very attempt to be separate. So, non-duality is jumping out of the duality of this soap opera entirely. And of course, the self-identity can never do this. But what if what you truly are is already beyond these roles? Then non-duality is simply the realization of your true nature. It is not intellectual. It is not achieved by effort or practices. It is the freedom from the identities, maintaining separation and suffering. Understanding animal well-being and the environmental impact of our food choices remains important. But true freedom comes from seeing how our identity-based positions actually prevent the change we seek. When we are no longer investing our sense of self in being either the enlightened vegan or the apex predator, real dialogue and sustainability and compassion becomes possible. This isn't about compromising our values. It's about discovering the unexpected opportunities that are possible beyond all roles and positions. Think about it. What if the very intensity of your stance on this issue whether for or against, is actually showing you something about yourself? What if your strongest judgments are actually pointing to your deepest wounds? What if the person you find hardest to understand is actually your greatest teacher? This is where real transformation becomes possible. Not by changing your diet or your beliefs, but by seeing through the very mechanism of identification that creates and maintains suffering on both sides. The freedom isn't in being right, it's in transcending the need to be right at all. And so, here is your opening tool. I invite you to sit with these questions, not as another method to take the edge of life that is so unfair, but as a simple looking and deepening. What's your impossible conversation? The one topic where you find it hardest to truly listen to the other side? And what makes it so challenging? While defending your position about food choices, what parts of yourself are you refusing to meet fully? Maybe your role is not a problem for you. And so, what else isn't problematic for the ego? And what is it costing you to keep it in charge? How much of your stance is driven by the need to be right rather than true compassion? And what if your judgment of the other side is actually showing you something about your own hidden pain? How might your life look different if you met those you disagree with through the lens of our shared humanity? What if both sides of this debate are equally necessary for your own awakening and self-realization? Thank you so much for watching. I'd be very curious to hear your take on this, and your comments and shares are wholeheartedly appreciated. Maybe it's a beginning of a different kind of a dialogue, and so I'd love to know from you if you could have a peaceful dinner with someone from the opposite side of any debate. What would you genuinely want to understand about their perspective? The invitation here isn't to change your behavior or beliefs. It's to look deeply at how you hold them, because in that looking, something profound can be discovered, a freedom that has nothing to do with positions and everything to do with what you really are beyond all roles. Are you tired of meditation? So is your butt. Check out my book, The End of Your Story, Spiritual Awakening Without Any Self-Development Tools. Try not to laugh. Available on my website or on Amazon.